Pretend you love me for 10 minutes, said the millionaire woman. What the janitor's single father did silenced everyone. Before we get into it, if this video found you at the right moment, let me know with your favorite emoji. The rain hammered against the windows of Manhattan's most exclusive medical center as Margaret Thornfield, 42, stood in her private hospital room, her hands trembling not from her recent surgery, but from the phone call she'd just received. Her empire, built over 20 years, was crumbling. The hostile takeover would be complete by morning. Mrs. Thornfield? A gentle voice interrupted her spiral of despair. I'm James Mitchell, the night janitor. I noticed your light was still on. Everything all right, ma'am? She turned to see a man in his late 30s, maybe 38, with kind eyes and calloused hands holding a mop. His uniform was worn but clean, his presence somehow comforting in this sterile world of wealth and betrayal. You wouldn't understand, Margaret whispered, tears threatening to fall. Tomorrow I lose everything. My company, my reputation, my entire life. James set down his equipment and stepped closer. Ma'am, I've been cleaning these halls for 12 years. I've seen plenty of people at their lowest. Sometimes talking to a stranger helps. Something in his voice, genuine, without judgment, broke through her defenses. My board of directors conspired against me. 20 years of building Thornfield Industries gone because I trusted the wrong people. And my husband. She laughed bitterly. He's probably celebrating with his mistress right now. I'm sorry, James said quietly. That's betrayal from every direction. But you know what I've learned working nights? Dawn always comes, even after the darkest hours. Margaret studied his face, seeing something she hadn't encountered in years. Authentic kindness. What's your story, James? Married? Children? Divorced 3 years now. I have a daughter, Emma. She's 8, lives with me full-time. His expression softened. My ex-wife left us for someone who could give her a different life. But Emma and I were doing just fine. A single father working nights to support his child, Margaret mused. That's more honorable than anything I've built. Their conversation was interrupted by her phone buzzing. Another board member, another betrayal, another piece of her life falling apart. As she hung up, desperation overwhelmed her. James, she said suddenly, an idea forming. I need to ask you something that will sound completely insane. He waited, patient and attentive. Tomorrow morning the vultures will circle. Press, lawyers, everyone who wants to watch Margaret Thornfield fall. But there's one thing that might save my reputation, might show them I'm not the cold, calculating woman they think I am. What do you need? Margaret took a deep breath. Finge que me ama por 10 minutos. James blinked, certain he'd misheard. Excuse me, ma'am. Pretend you love me for 10 minutes. Margaret repeated, her voice steadier now. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. there's a press conference. If they see me with someone real, someone who cares, it changes the narrative. I'm not the heartless CEO who destroyed her own company. I'm a woman who found love in the most unexpected place. Mrs. Thornfield, I'll pay you $50,000, she said quickly. Enough to secure Emma's future, her college fund. All you have to do is hold my hand. Look at me like you care, and tell the cameras that you love me. James felt his world tilt. $50,000 would change everything for Emma. She could have the private school education he'd dreamed of giving her, the opportunities he'd never had. But this felt wrong on every level. Why me? He asked finally. Because in the last hour, you've shown me more genuine kindness than my husband has in 5 years. Because you're real, James. You're what they'll never expect. He thought of Emma, asleep in their tiny apartment above Mrs. Chen's bakery. How he worked double shifts to afford her dance classes. How she never complained when dinner was mac and cheese again. This could give her everything. Just 10 minutes? He confirmed. 10 minutes. You show up, we appear together, you say you love me, and then you disappear forever. I'll transfer the money before you even leave the building. James studied her face, seeing past the desperation to something else. A woman who'd been hurt as badly as he had, maybe worse. This isn't just about the press conference, is it? This is about showing your husband that someone could love you. Margaret's composure cracked slightly. Richard hasn't touched me in 2 years. He looks at me like I'm a business transaction. I want someone to look at me like I matter. Even if it's pretend, even if it's just for 10 minutes. 10. The vulnerability in her voice decided it for him. Okay, but I have conditions. Name them. I won't lie to my daughter. If she ever asks about this, I tell her the truth. And whatever happens tomorrow, you remember that somewhere out there, a little girl depends on me coming home every night. Margaret nodded, something shifting in her expression. You're nothing like I expected. What did you expect? Someone who would take the money and not think twice. Someone who wouldn't care about the ethics or the consequences. She paused. Someone like everyone else in my world. James picked up his mop, then hesitated. Mrs. Thornfield? For what it's worth, any man who would betray you is a fool. Money doesn't make someone worth loving, but kindness does. As he walked toward the door, Margaret called out, James, thank you. Not just for tomorrow. For tonight. For listening. He turned back. What time should I be there? 8:45, main lobby. She managed a small smile. And James? Wear something nice. We're going to convince the world that love conquered all. After he left, Margaret sat in the silence, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life, or taken the first step toward saving it. At 6 a.m., James stood in his bathroom mirror, electric razor in hand, questioning everything. Emma was eating cereal at their small kitchen table, humming her favorite song, completely unaware that her father was about to potentially change their lives forever. Daddy, why are you wearing your church shirt? Emma asked as he joined her for breakfast. I have an important meeting today, sweetheart. Mrs. Chen will pick you up from school, okay? Emma nodded, then studied his face with the intensity only 8-year-olds possessed. Are you nervous? Your eye is doing that twitchy thing. James laughed despite himself. Emma had inherited her mother's observational skills, but thankfully none of Sarah's coldness. A little nervous, yes. But sometimes we have to do scary things for good reasons. Like when I had to read my poem in front of the whole class. Exactly like that. He kissed the top of her head. What did we learn about being brave? Being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you are scared. Emma recited their familiar mantra. That's my girl. Meanwhile, across the city, Margaret sat in her penthouse apartment that now felt more like a mausoleum. Richard hadn't come home. Again. His lawyer had already called twice about asset protection strategies, which was rich, considering he'd contributed nothing to building those assets. She'd chosen a simple navy dress. Elegant, but not flashy. The goal was to look like a woman in love, not a CEO making a power play. But as she applied lipstick, her hands shook. What was she doing? This was insane. James Mitchell was a janitor with an 8-year-old daughter, and she was about to drag him into her messy public downfall. The man worked nights to support his child, showed her kindness when she needed it most, and she was repaying him by potentially destroying his privacy forever. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. Media circus already gathering, 17 news vans and counting. Margaret closed her eyes. Too late to back out now. Her reputation, her company, her future, all riding on 10 minutes with a man who'd probably forgotten more about real love than she'd ever known. At 8:30, James emerged from the subway wearing his only suit, the one he'd bought for Emma's school graduation ceremony. He'd practiced what to say, how to look at Margaret, how to sell the story. But as he approached the medical center and saw the crowd of reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers, his nerve nearly failed. This wasn't just about 10 minutes anymore. These images would be broadcast everywhere. Emma would see them eventually. His neighbors, his co-workers, Emma's teachers. Everyone would know he'd taken money to pretend to love someone. He pulled out his phone to call Margaret to tell her he couldn't do it. Then he thought about Emma's worn-out backpack, the college fund that contained exactly $247, the dreams he'd had to put on hold since Sarah left them. Sometimes being a good father meant making impossible choices. At 8:43, he walked through the lobby doors, and his life changed forever. Margaret saw him before he saw her. Even in his modest suit, James carried himself with dignity that most of her wealthy acquaintances lacked. He looked around the chaos of reporters and camera crews with wide eyes, but he didn't run. That took courage. James, she called softly as she approached. You came. I said I would. His voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Are you sure about this? Before she could answer, a reporter spotted them. Mrs. Thornfield, is it true you're resigning from Thornfield Industries? Can you comment on the allegations of financial misconduct? Margaret's composure slipped for just a moment, but James saw it. Without thinking, he reached for her hand. The gesture was so natural, so protective, that several cameras immediately focused on their joined hands. It's going to be okay, he said quietly, and the microphones picked up every word. I'm here. The simple statement sent a ripple through the crowd. Who was this man? How did he know Margaret Thornfield? Ma'am, We should make the statement now, Margaret's assistant whispered urgently. Margaret nodded, then looked at James. This is it. Once we do this, there's no taking it back. I understand, James replied. Do what you need to do. They approached the podium together, hands still linked. The morning sun streaming through the lobby windows created an almost ethereal glow around them. Margaret had never looked more vulnerable, and James had never looked more determined. Ladies and gentlemen, Margaret began, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet lobby. I know you're here because of rumors about my company, about my marriage, about my life falling apart. Some of those rumors are true, but what you don't know, what no one knew until recently, is that in my darkest hour, I found something I never expected to find. She turned to look at James, and for a moment the practiced speech disappeared. Looking into his kind eyes, she forgot about the cameras, the reporters, the carefully orchestrated plan. I found someone who sees me not as Margaret Thornfield, the CEO, or Margaret Thornfield, the wealthy socialite. He sees me as just Margaret, a woman who was lost and scared and needed someone to remind her that she was worth caring about. The crowd was completely silent now, sensing something authentic unfolding. James knew his line was coming. He was supposed to say he loved her, that they'd found each other despite their different worlds. But looking at Margaret, really looking at her, he saw past the designer dress and perfect makeup to the woman who'd sat alone in a hospital room, betrayed by everyone she'd trusted. His prepared speech died in his throat. The first night I met Margaret, he said instead, his voice carrying clearly through the lobby. She was sitting alone, crying. Not because she'd lost money or status or power. She was crying because she'd lost hope. And I realized something that night. Maybe the most important thing I've ever realized. Margaret's eyes widened. This wasn't what they'd rehearsed. I realized that it doesn't matter how much money you have or how successful you are, or what kind of car you drive. When you're hurting, when you're alone, when everyone you trusted has let you down, none of that means anything. What matters is having someone who will sit with you in the dark and remind you that morning always comes. The reporters were furiously scribbling notes, but James barely noticed them anymore. Do I love Margaret Thornfield? He paused, looking directly at her. Yes, I love her courage. I love that she built something from nothing. I love that she trusted a stranger with her pain. And I love that despite everything she's going through, she still worries about other people. The words hung in the air like a sacred moment frozen in time. Margaret stared at James, her heart racing, because somehow, impossibly, she knew he wasn't acting anymore. The man who was supposed to pretend to love her for money had just declared feelings that sounded startlingly real. Mister, I'm sorry, what's your name? A reporter called out. James Mitchell, he answered, still looking at Margaret. I work here. I'm a single father, and I clean these floors every night to provide for my daughter Emma. A murmur ran through the crowd. This wasn't the typical billionaire romance story they'd expected. How did you and Mrs. Thornfield meet? Another reporter pressed. James squeezed Margaret's hand gently before answering. Sometimes the most important conversations happen at 3 a.m. when the rest of the world is asleep. Margaret was going through the worst night of her life, and I just happened to be there. But you know what I learned? She's not the cold businesswoman people think she is. She's generous and funny and incredibly lonely. She deserves better than she's gotten. Margaret felt tears threatening. No one had ever defended her so publicly, so completely. Richard certainly never had. Mrs. Thornfield, is it true you're planning to divorce your husband? A reporter shouted. Yes, Margaret said firmly, finding her voice. My marriage has been over for years. We both knew it. The only thing keeping us together was habit and fear of scandal. But James taught me something important, that staying in a loveless situation because it's comfortable isn't living. It's just existing. So you're confirming you're in a relationship with your janitor? The reporter's tone was slightly mocking. James stepped forward slightly, his jaw tightening. Yes, she's in a relationship with her janitor. A man who works 2 jobs to take care of his daughter. A man who's never asked her for anything except honesty. A man who sees her worth has nothing to do with her bank account. Margaret looked at him with genuine amazement. James, and you know what else? James continued, addressing the crowd now. Margaret Thornfield built a company that employs 3,000 people. She provides health insurance for families, scholarships for kids like my daughter, and she's donated millions to charities without ever seeking credit. So yes, I'm proud to love her. Anyone who has a problem with that can answer to me. The conviction in his voice was so powerful that several reporters actually stepped back. Margaret's assistant whispered in her ear, "Ma'am, we should wrap this up." But Margaret wasn't ready. Something was happening here. Something she hadn't expected. "James, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he said quietly, though the microphone still caught it. "Because you deserve to have someone fight for you. You deserve to have someone choose you, not your money or your status. Just you." An older reporter in the back called out, "This is very romantic, but Mrs. Thornfield? What about the allegations regarding Thornfield Industries? Are you stepping down?" Margaret straightened her shoulders. "I built Thornfield Industries from a small consulting firm into what it is today. Yes, there are challenges. Yes, some people I trusted made mistakes, but I'm not running away. I'm going to fix what's broken and rebuild what's been damaged. And I'm going to do it with someone beside me who believes in me, not in what I can do for him, but in who I am." She turned to James one final time. "Thank you," she whispered. "Just for him." "For what?" he whispered back. "For reminding me who I used to be, before I became afraid of everything." As they walked away from the podium together, James realized something that should have terrified him. Somewhere between the prepared lies and authentic truth, he'd actually fallen in love with Margaret Thornfield. And judging by the way she held his hand, not like a prop in a performance, but like a lifeline, she might have fallen a little bit in love with him too. But neither of them had any idea that the hardest part was just beginning. 3 hours later, James sat in Margaret's penthouse apartment, feeling completely out of place among the marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The $50,000 had been transferred to his account as promised, but the money felt strange now, tainted by feelings that had become unexpectedly real. "Emma's school called," Margaret said, hanging up her phone. "Apparently some reporters tried to approach her during recess. My security team is handling it, but James, I'm so sorry. I never thought." "It's okay," James said, though his jaw was tight with worry. "Mrs. Chen picked her up early. She's safe." Margaret paced the length of her living room, designer heels clicking against the marble. "No, it's not okay. Your daughter shouldn't have to deal with this because of my problems. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. Innocent people getting hurt." "Margaret, stop." James stood up, catching her hands as she paced past him. "Emma's fine. She's tougher than you think. But we need to talk about what happened down there." "You mean the part where you completely deviated from our agreement?" Margaret's voice held no anger, only confusion. "I meant every word I said," James replied quietly. "That wasn't part of the act, Margaret. Somewhere between agreeing to help you and walking up to that podium, something changed for me." Margaret stared at him, searching his face. "James, you don't understand what you're saying. My world, it destroys people like you. Look what happened to Emma in just 3 hours. Imagine what happens when the novelty wears off, when reality sets in." "What reality? That I'm a janitor and you're a CEO? That I live in a 2-bedroom apartment and you live in a penthouse? Or that despite all of that, we actually care about each other? It matters, James. Society, expectations, the way people will treat Emma. The way people treat Emma is my concern, not yours," James said firmly. "And you know what I think? I think you're scared, not of what people will say about me. You're scared of what happens if this is real." Margaret sank onto her leather sofa, the fight going out of her. "My husband left me a voicemail. He's filing for divorce and demanding half of everything, including assets he had no part in building. My board of directors voted to remove me as CEO this afternoon, and now every news station in America is running a story about the fallen businesswoman and her janitor boyfriend. So yes, James, I'm scared. I'm terrified that I've ruined your life for 10 minutes of feeling like someone might actually love me." James sat beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something simple and clean that probably cost less than her morning coffee. "You want to know what I'm scared of?" She nodded. "I'm scared that Emma will grow up thinking love is something you settle for instead of something worth fighting for. I'm scared that I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to see where this could go. And I'm scared that you're going to push me away because you think I deserve better when the truth is, Margaret, I've never met anyone who makes me want to be better than you do." Margaret looked at him through tears she was trying not to shed. "James, you have no idea what you're walking into. The media scrutiny, the judgment, the way people will dissect every aspect of our lives." "Then let them," James said simply. "Let them talk. Let them judge. Let them call me a gold digger or you a fool. But don't you dare push me away because you're afraid of what other people think. We both know what it's like to be lonely, Margaret. We both know what it feels like to be betrayed by people we trusted. But for the first time in years, I look at someone and feel hope. Don't take that away from both of us. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, studying their joined hands. His were rough from work, scarred from years of manual labor. Hers were soft, manicured, decorated with rings that cost more than his annual salary. They should have looked ridiculous together, but somehow they fit. If we do this, if we really try, there are things you need to know about me. Things that might change how you feel. Like what? Like the fact that I haven't been happy in my marriage for 5 years. Like the fact that I threw myself into work because it was easier than admitting I'd married the wrong man. Like the fact that until yesterday I couldn't remember the last time someone looked at me and saw a person instead of a bank account. James lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles gently. Margaret, I've been cleaning offices for 12 years. You know what I've learned? The most successful people are often the loneliest. They're surrounded by people who want something from them, and they forget what it feels like to be wanted for who they are. I don't want your money. I don't want your connections or your lifestyle. I want you, the woman who cried alone in a hospital room, the woman who worried about how this might affect my daughter, the woman who's brave enough to rebuild her life from scratch. Margaret felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been frozen for years. James, what if this doesn't work? What if... He silenced her with a kiss that was gentle and sure, and tasted like the promise of new beginnings. When they broke apart, Margaret whispered, "What do we tell Emma?" "We tell her the truth," James said, "that sometimes adults meet someone special, and they want to see if they can build something beautiful together. And we promise her that no matter what happens between us, she comes first. Always." Margaret nodded, then smiled for the first time all day. "So where do we go from here?" "Well," James grinned, "I believe I have a very important 8-year-old to introduce you to, and something tells me that's going to be a bigger challenge than facing the press." Outside the penthouse windows, the sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, they were both looking forward to finding out. The real story was just beginning. 2 weeks later, James stood outside Emma's elementary school, waiting for the meeting he'd been dreading. The principal had called that morning, her voice carefully neutral as she mentioned concerns about Emma's situation. Translation: the media attention was affecting his daughter and the school wanted answers. "Mr. Mitchell?" Principal Hayes emerged from the building, her smile professional but strained. "Thank you for coming in." "Is Emma in trouble?" James asked immediately. "Not trouble exactly, but we need to discuss the complications arising from your relationship with Mrs. Thornfield. Perhaps we could talk in my office." As they walked through the hallways, James noticed how the other parents looked at him, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed judgment. Word had spread quickly through their small Queens community about Emma's father and the billionaire CEO. "Mr. Mitchell," Principal Hayes began once they were seated, "Emma is a wonderful child, but she's been asking her teachers some difficult questions lately. Questions about why reporters want to take her picture, why her classmates are whispering about her, why some parents are treating her differently." James felt his chest tighten. What kind of differently? Yesterday, Mrs. Patterson wouldn't let Emma play with her daughter Sophia. She said it wasn't appropriate anymore. And this morning, 3 different parents approached me asking if Emma was going to be transferred to a private school now that her family has money. Emma doesn't have money. I have the same job I've always had. Nothing about her life has changed except that people are treating her like a circus attraction. Principal Hayes nodded sympathetically. "I understand your frustration, but Mr. Mitchell, Emma told her class yesterday that her daddy found a princess who was sad, and now they're helping each other be happy." The other children started asking if that made Emma a princess too. It's creating dynamics we're not equipped to handle. James rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of his choices pressing down on him. "What are you suggesting?" "Perhaps some distance from the situation might be beneficial, just until the media attention dies down. Maybe Mrs. Thornfield could..." "No," James's voice was firm. "You're asking me to choose between my daughter's comfort and my relationship, but the problem isn't Margaret or me. The problem is people treating an 8-year-old differently because of who her father is dating." "Mr. Mitchell, I'm not trying to interfere in your personal life." "Yes, you are. You're telling me that if I date someone the community disapproves of, my daughter will face consequences. That's not protecting Emma. That's teaching her that love comes with conditions." Meanwhile, across the city, Margaret was facing her own impossible meeting. Her divorce attorney, Patricia Wells, sat across from her mahogany desk with a stack of papers and a grim expression. Richard's demands are excessive, but not unexpected, Patricia explained. Half of all assets, including the company stock, the penthouse, the Hamptons house, and spousal support of $200,000 monthly for 5 years. He contributed nothing to building those assets, Margaret said coolly. That's irrelevant in New York. But Margaret, there's something else. Richard's attorney is arguing that your relationship with Mr. Mitchell proves you were having an emotional affair during the marriage. They're claiming it justifies his own infidelity and strengthens his financial position. Margaret felt sick. That's ridiculous. I met James 2 weeks ago. I know that. You know that. But Richard's team is going to argue that a relationship this intense, this public, this quickly couldn't have developed overnight. They're going to suggest it was ongoing. So because I fell in love with someone, Richard gets to claim I was unfaithful, even though he's been cheating for years? Patricia leaned forward. Margaret, I need to ask you something directly. Is this relationship with James Mitchell worth potentially losing millions in the divorce? Because that's what's at stake. If you ended things now, before this goes to court, stop. Margaret's voice cut through the office like ice. Don't finish that sentence. James isn't a liability to be managed. He's the first honest thing that's happened to me in years. I'm trying to protect your interests. No, you're asking me to throw away the best thing in my life to save money. And you know what? I'd rather lose every penny than become the kind of person who treats love like a business transaction. That evening, Margaret arrived at James's apartment for dinner, carrying Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than his monthly grocery budget. But as soon as she saw his face, she knew something was wrong. Emma's in her room, James said quietly. She had a rough day at school. Margaret set down the food and immediately focused on him. What happened? James told her about the meeting with Principal Hayes, about the parents who were treating Emma like she was contagious, about the way his daughter had come home asking if loving someone rich made people angry. James, I'm so sorry, Margaret said, sinking onto his worn couch. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Emma is paying the price for our choices. No, James said firmly, sitting beside her. Emma is paying the price for other people's prejudices. But that doesn't mean we're wrong, Margaret. It means we have to be stronger. Margaret looked around the apartment, at the mismatched furniture, the stack of bills on the kitchen counter, the crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. 3 weeks ago, this would have looked like poverty to her. Now it looked like home. I need to tell you something, she said quietly. My divorce attorney thinks I should end our relationship. She says it's going to cost me millions. James went very still. And what do you think? I think she's probably right. I think dating you is going to be the most expensive decision I've ever made. Margaret turned to face him fully. And I think it's also going to be the best decision I've ever made. Before James could respond, Emma appeared in the hallway, wearing her favorite pajamas and holding a stuffed elephant named Mr. Peanuts. Daddy, is Margaret the reason the other kids are being mean to me? The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Margaret felt her heart break as she looked at Emma's serious little face, so much like her father's but with an innocence that neither adult possessed anymore. James knelt down to Emma's eye level. Sweetheart, come here. Let's talk about this. Emma approached slowly, clutching Mr. Peanuts tighter. Sophia's mom said I can't play with her anymore because my daddy is dating a rich lady and it's not proper. What does proper mean? Margaret watched James struggle with how to explain adult prejudice to a child, and her resolve crystallized. She knelt down beside James, making sure she was at Emma's height too. Emma, can I tell you something? Sometimes adults get scared when they see something different, even if that different thing is beautiful. Your daddy and I care about each other very much, and some people think that's strange because we have different kinds of jobs and live in different places. But why does that make them mean to me? Emma asked, her eyes bright with tears she was trying not to shed. Because they don't understand that love isn't about having the same amount of money or living in the same kind of house. Margaret said gently, love is about how you make each other feel. Your daddy makes me feel safe and happy and like I'm the best version of myself. And I hope I make him feel good too. Emma considered this seriously. Do you love my daddy? Margaret glanced at James, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. They'd been dancing around the actual word for 2 weeks, both too scared to be the first to say it. Yes, Emma, I love your daddy very much. And Daddy, do you love Margaret? James's voice was steady and sure. Yes, sweetheart, I do. Emma nodded solemnly, then looked directly at Margaret. Are you going to take my daddy away like Mommy said rich ladies do? The question hit Margaret like a physical blow. She realized Emma had been carrying this fear for 2 weeks, watching and waiting to see if Margaret would destroy her small, stable world the way Sarah had. "Emma, look at me," Margaret said firmly. "I promise you, on everything I care about, that I will never take your daddy away from you. You are the most important person in his life, and you always will be. If your daddy and I build something together, it will be something that makes your family bigger, not smaller. But what if you change your mind? What if you decide you don't want a little girl around?" Margaret felt tears threatening. "Oh, sweetheart. Emma, do you know what I was doing before I met your daddy? I was sitting alone in a big empty apartment wishing I had a family, wishing I had someone like you to make me laugh and teach me things and remind me what's really important. If anything, I'm hoping you might let me be part of your family, not the other way around." Emma studied Margaret's face with the intense scrutiny only children possessed. "Would you come to my dance recital next week, even if people stare and whisper?" "I would be honored to come to your dance recital," Margaret said without hesitation. "And if people stare and whisper, we'll let them, because we'll know something they don't, that families come in all different shapes and love doesn't care about bank accounts." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. She climbed onto the couch between Margaret and James, still holding Mr. Peanuts. "Can we eat the Chinese food now? I'm really hungry and it smells good." As they ate dinner together, Emma chattering about her day, James helping with homework, Margaret learning to use chopsticks properly, Margaret realized something profound. This messy, complicated, imperfect situation felt more like home than any of her perfectly decorated properties ever had. But their peaceful evening was interrupted by James's phone ringing. The caller ID showed his ex-wife's number. "Sarah?" James answered, immediately tense. Emma looked up sharply at her mother's name, and Margaret instinctively moved closer to the little girl. "What do you mean? What right do I have?" James's voice was rising. "She's my daughter, Sarah. I have every right to—" Margaret could hear Sarah's voice through the phone, shrill and angry, though she couldn't make out the words. "You lost the right to dictate my personal life when you walked out on us 3 years ago," James said firmly. "Emma is happy, healthy, and loved. That's all that matters." "Daddy?" Emma whispered, scared by the tension in her father's voice. James caught himself, remembering his daughter was listening. "Sarah, I can't discuss this right now. We'll talk later." He hung up and immediately pulled Emma into a hug. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy is just concerned about some things, but everything is fine." Margaret felt a chill run down her spine. She'd been so focused on the media attention and social judgment that she'd forgotten about Emma's mother, a woman who'd already proven she would abandon her child when life got difficult, and who now probably saw dollar signs in Margaret's presence. "James," Margaret said quietly, "we need to talk. After Emma goes to bed." But Emma was already picking up on the adult's tension. "Is Mommy mad about Margaret?" James and Margaret exchanged looks over Emma's head, both realizing that their biggest challenge wasn't going to be judgmental parents or greedy divorce lawyers. It was going to be a woman who'd already broken Emma's heart once, and who might be willing to do it again if it meant she could profit from their relationship. At 9 p.m., after Emma was finally asleep, James and Margaret sat in his small living room nursing cups of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The conversation with Sarah had lasted 30 minutes and left James looking like he'd been hit by a truck. "She wants to modify our custody agreement," James said, staring at his hands. "Claims that my relationship with a wealthy woman creates an unstable environment for Emma. She's demanding supervised visitation and threatening to take me to court if I don't end things with you." Margaret felt her stomach drop. "James, she can't do that. You're an excellent father. She can try, and even if she loses, the legal fees would bankrupt me. I make $35,000 a year, Margaret. I can't afford to fight a custody battle, especially not against someone who might suddenly have access to expensive lawyers." "What do you mean, suddenly have access?" James looked at her with exhaustion that went bone deep. "Sarah remarried 6 months ago. Her new husband is Derek Patterson, Patterson Construction. He's not billionaire-level wealthy, but he's got enough money to cause problems. And apparently he's very interested in the idea that Emma might have access to connections through our relationship." Margaret felt pieces clicking into place. Patterson, as in Mrs. Patterson, who wouldn't let Emma play with her daughter. Derek's sister-in-law? Small world, right? James's laugh was bitter. Turns out this whole thing is connected. The school parents treating Emma differently. Sarah suddenly wanting custody. The concerned community members who've been calling child services. Child services? Margaret's voice was sharp with alarm. 3 anonymous tips this week claiming that Emma's being exploited for media attention. They have to investigate every report, which means social workers showing up at Emma's school, asking her teachers questions, making her feel like she's done something wrong. Margaret stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the bakery below. Mrs. Chen was closing up, turning off the lights one by one. Such a normal, peaceful scene, while their world was falling apart upstairs. "This is my fault," Margaret said quietly. "All of it. I was so focused on my own problems, my own loneliness, that I didn't think about the consequences for you and Emma." "Margaret, don't..." "No, James, listen to me. I'm a 42-year-old woman who should have known better. You're a single father trying to protect your daughter, and I've made that job infinitely harder. Every day Emma stays in this situation, she faces more judgment, more whispers, more questions about why her life is suddenly newsworthy." James stood and moved toward her, but Margaret held up a hand to stop him. "What if Sarah's right?" Margaret continued, her voice breaking slightly. "Not about you being a bad father, you're the best father I've ever seen. But what if Emma really is better off without me in her life? What if the most loving thing I could do is walk away?" "You're talking about giving up," James said quietly. "After everything we've been through, everything we've built, you want to walk away because some people are making it difficult?" "I'm talking about putting Emma first, something I should have done from the beginning." James moved closer, his voice intense. "Emma asked you to come to her dance recital. She asked if you loved me. She asked if you would take me away from her. You know what she didn't ask? She didn't ask you to leave. The only people asking you to leave are adults who are scared of what we represent." "And what do we represent, James? A fairy tale? A feel-good story? Real life isn't a movie where love conquers all. Real life is 8-year-olds getting excluded from playdates and fathers losing custody of their children, and real life is also fighting for what matters," James interrupted. "Real life is showing Emma that when you love someone, you don't abandon them the first time things get hard. Real life is proving that some things are worth the struggle." Margaret turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "But what if we're wrong? What if we're being selfish? What if in 6 months or a year you look at everything this relationship has cost you and Emma, and you hate me for it?" James cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Margaret, 3 weeks ago, Emma asked me why some kids have mommies and daddies and she only has a daddy. You know what I told her? I told her that families come in different shapes, but love is what makes them work. Tonight, for the first time since her mother left, Emma has seen what it looks like when 2 adults love and support each other. She's seen what it looks like when someone chooses to stay instead of leave. But the cost will be worth it. Even if we lose everything else, even if the whole world turns against us, it will be worth it. Because Emma will know that love exists, that good people fight for each other, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is stand up to people who want you to be smaller than you are." Margaret leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. "I'm scared, James. I'm scared that I'm going to destroy your life, and Emma's life, because I fell in love with both of you. Then be scared, but don't run. Because Emma needs to see that the adults in her life don't disappear when things get complicated. She's had enough people walk away from her." They held each other in the middle of his small living room, 2 people who'd found something precious and were watching the whole world try to take it away. Outside, New York continued its relentless pace, indifferent to their struggles. Neither of them knew that in her bedroom, Emma was lying awake, listening to every word, and making her own 8-year-old decision about what needed to happen next. The next morning, Margaret woke up in James's apartment for the first time. She'd fallen asleep on his couch after their emotional conversation, and he'd covered her with a blanket rather than wake her. Now sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as she heard voices. James and Emma having breakfast. "Daddy, we need to have a family meeting," Emma was saying with the seriousness only 8-year-olds could muster. "A family meeting? About what, sweetheart?" "About Margaret and the mean people and what we're going to do." Margaret stayed still, not wanting to interrupt, but curious about Emma's perspective on their situation. "Emma, the grown-ups are handling..." "No, Daddy. The grown-ups are being scared and sad and talking about giving up. But I have ideas." Margaret smiled despite everything. Emma definitely had James's determination. "Okay," James said. "What are your ideas?" "First, we need to tell everyone that Margaret isn't trying to steal you from me. She's trying to make our family bigger. Second, we need to show them that we're happy, not sad. And third, we need to stop caring what mean people think." "That's actually pretty wise advice, Em. I know I'm very smart. Mrs. Rodriguez says I get it from you." Margaret decided to join them, appearing in the kitchen doorway. "Good morning. I hope you don't mind that I slept on your couch." "Margaret!" Emma jumped up and ran to hug her. "I was just telling Daddy about our family meeting. You have to come." "A family meeting?" Margaret looked at James questioningly. "Apparently, Emma has some ideas about how to handle our situation," James explained, pouring Margaret a cup of coffee. They sat around the small kitchen table, the same table where James and Emma had eaten breakfast together for 3 years, but now it felt different. It felt like the three of them belonged there together. "Okay, Emma," Margaret said seriously. "What's your plan?" Emma took a deep breath, clearly having thought this through. "The problem is that people think you want to change us or that we want to change you. But that's not true, right?" "Right," both adults said simultaneously. "So we need to show them. Daddy, you should keep your job. Don't quit to work for Margaret's company or anything. And Margaret, you should still live in your big apartment. We're not trying to be exactly the same. We're trying to be a family that fits together even though we're different." Margaret and James exchanged amazed looks. Emma had articulated something they'd been struggling to express for weeks. "And," Emma continued, "we should do normal family things where people can see us. Like going to the park or the grocery store or my dance recital. If people see that we're just normal and happy, maybe they'll stop being scared." "Emma, some people might always be scared," James said gently. "Sometimes adults have trouble understanding that love comes in different forms." "Then they're being silly," Emma said matter-of-factly. "And we don't have to be silly too." Margaret felt tears threatening again, but these were different tears. "Emma, you are absolutely right. And you know what? I think we should start today." "How?" James asked. Margaret smiled, an idea forming. "Well, I believe someone has a dance recital this week, and I believe the whole school community will be there. What if we showed up together, as a family, and just existed? No press, no statements, no drama, just a dad and his girlfriend watching his daughter dance." "People will stare," James warned. "Let them stare," Emma said firmly. "I'm a really good dancer. They should be watching me, not whispering about you guys." "You're sure about this, Em?" James asked. "Because once we do this, there's no taking it back. Everyone will know that Margaret and I are serious about each other, and about including you in our relationship." Emma considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "Daddy, are you happy when Margaret is here?" "Yes." "Margaret, are you happy when you're with me and Daddy?" "Very happy." "Then we should be happy together where everyone can see. And if they don't like it, that's their problem, not ours." Margaret reached across the table and took Emma's small hand. "Emma Mitchell, you are the wisest person I've ever met. And you know what? I think your plan is perfect." "Does this mean we're officially a family now?" Emma asked hopefully. James and Margaret looked at each other, communicating volumes in a single glance. They'd been tiptoeing around the word, afraid of the implications, afraid of moving too fast. But Emma was right. They'd been acting like a family for weeks. Maybe it was time to start calling it what it was. "Yes," Margaret said firmly. "We're officially a family now." Emma grinned and jumped up from the table. "I have to call Mrs. Chen and tell her. She's been worried about us." As Emma ran to get the phone, James caught Margaret's hand. "Are you sure about this? Really sure? Because Emma's right. Once we do this publicly, there's no going back." Margaret squeezed his hand. "James, I've spent my entire adult life making safe choices, practical choices, choices that protected my reputation and my assets. And you know what? I ended up alone and miserable. For once in my life, I want to make the brave choice. The choice that might cost me everything but gives me something worth having. Even if it means dealing with Sarah and Derek? Even if it means custody battles and media scrutiny and judgment from every direction?" Margaret leaned across the table and kissed him softly. "Especially then, because Emma needs to see that some things are worth fighting for. And James, you and Emma are worth fighting for." From the living room, they could hear Emma excitedly telling Mrs. Chen about their family meeting and their plan for the dance recital. "Margaret," James said quietly, "I love you, not because you're wealthy or successful, or because you can give Emma opportunities I can't. I love you because you make our small life feel abundant. You make me believe that happiness isn't something you have to earn, it's something you choose." "I love you too," Margaret replied. "Both of you. And Emma's right. It's time to stop being scared and start being happy where everyone can see." But neither of them knew that Derek Patterson had been watching James's apartment building all morning, taking photos with a telephoto lens, documenting Margaret's overnight stay for Sarah's custody lawyer. The battle they'd decided to fight was about to become much more public than either of them imagined. The Lincoln Elementary School gymnasium had been transformed for the annual spring dance recital. Folding chairs arranged in neat rows, a small stage decorated with paper flowers, and the excited chatter of families filled the space. Margaret, James, and Emma arrived together 20 minutes before the performance, and the reaction was immediate. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Phone cameras discreetly emerged from purses and pockets. Margaret wore a simple navy dress and cardigan. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed wealth. James wore his best khakis and a button-down shirt. Emma bounced between them, holding both their hands, oblivious to the attention they were generating. "There's Sophia's mom," Emma whispered, pointing toward Mrs. Patterson, who was standing with a cluster of other parents and staring openly at their trio. "Remember what we discussed," Margaret said quietly. "We're here for you, not for them." They found seats in the third row, close enough for Emma to see them clearly from the stage. As Emma ran backstage to get ready with her dance class, Margaret and James sat together, acutely aware of being the center of attention. "Mr. Mitchell?" A voice behind them made James turn. It was Principal Hayes, looking uncomfortable. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" James felt Margaret's hand squeeze his. "Of course. Margaret, this is Emma's principal, Mrs. Hayes." "Mrs. Thornfield." Principal Hayes nodded politely but coolly. "Mr. Mitchell, I wanted to let you know that we've had several parents express concerns about having media attention at our school event." "There's no media here," James said firmly. "We came to watch Emma dance, nothing more." "Yes, but several parents have mentioned seeing news vans in the parking lot." "Those aren't here for us," Margaret interrupted. "We specifically chose not to publicize our attendance. If there are reporters here, they're here on their own, and we can't control that." Principal Hayes looked skeptical but nodded. "I just wanted you to be aware that if any disruption occurs, the only disruption will be from people who can't mind their own business," James said, his patience finally wearing thin. "Emma is a student here. I'm her father. I have every right to watch her perform." "Of course," Principal Hayes retreated quickly. "I just wanted to communicate the concerns." As she walked away, Margaret leaned closer to James. "She's scared. The parents are putting pressure on the school and she's caught in the middle." "Everyone's scared," James muttered. "Scared of change, scared of differences, scared of anything that challenges their narrow view of how the world should work." The lights dimmed, and the first group of dancers took the stage. Margaret watched James's face as he searched for Emma among the tiny ballerinas, and her heart swelled with love for this man who worked 2 jobs and still made time to braid his daughter's hair for dance recitals. When Emma's group performed, a sweet routine to Somewhere Over the Rainbow, both Margaret and James beamed with pride. Emma was graceful and confident, her face glowing with joy as she spotted them in the audience. When she finished, she gave them a little wave, and Margaret felt tears spring to her eyes. But during intermission, their peaceful evening shattered. "James Mitchell?" A woman approached them with a confident smile and a legal folder. "I'm Patricia Morrison, representing Sarah Mitchell in your custody matter. You've been served." The blood drained from James's face as he took the papers. Around them, conversations stopped as people realized they were witnessing drama unfold. "What does it say?" Margaret whispered. James scanned the documents, his face growing paler with each page. "Emergency custody hearing. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., she's claiming that my relationship with you constitutes child endangerment due to excessive media exposure and unstable living conditions brought on by an inappropriate relationship with a woman of questionable moral character." Margaret felt like she'd been slapped. Questionable moral character? "There's more," James continued reading. "She's requesting immediate supervised visitation only, pending a full custody evaluation, and she's demanding that Emma not be allowed any contact with you until the hearing is resolved." The woman who'd served the papers was still standing there, clearly enjoying the spectacle. "Mrs. Thornfield, you might want to know that there are several photographers outside. This little family outing is going to be front-page news tomorrow." Margaret stood up abruptly, fury blazing in her eyes. "Get away from us now." "Just doing my job, ma'am. Your job is to serve papers, not to provide commentary. Leave." The woman shrugged and walked away, but the damage was done. Half the gymnasium was now openly staring at them, phones out, recording everything. James sat frozen, still holding the custody papers. "Margaret, they're going to take Emma away from me." "No, they're not," Margaret said fiercely. "James, look at me. They are not going to take Emma away from you. You don't understand. I can't afford to fight this. Even if I win, the legal fees will destroy me. And if I lose, his voice broke. Emma is everything to me. She's my whole world. Margaret knelt down beside his chair, not caring who was watching. James, listen to me very carefully. They are not going to take Emma away from you because I am not going to let that happen. Do you understand me? Margaret, you can't. I can and I will. I'm going to hire the best family law attorney in New York. I'm going to fight this with everything I have. Because Emma is not the only one who's your whole world now. You're both my whole world, and I protect what's mine. From backstage, they could hear the announcement that the second half of the program was about to begin. In a few minutes, Emma would be looking for them in the audience, expecting to see their proud faces cheering her on. What do we tell her? James asked quietly. We tell her that some people are trying to cause problems, but we're going to handle it. We tell her that no matter what happens, we love her and we're going to fight for our family. James looked at Margaret, seeing the determination in her eyes, the fierce protectiveness that had emerged. Margaret, if we do this, if we really fight this, it's going to get ugly. They're going to attack both of us in ways we can't imagine. Let them try, Margaret said firmly. I've been through a hostile takeover attempt and a vicious divorce. But you know what I've never had before? Something worth fighting for. Someone worth fighting for. The lights dimmed again, signaling the start of the second half. Margaret and James took their seats, hands clasped tightly together, putting on brave faces for Emma even as their world crumbled around them. On stage, Emma danced with the same joy and confidence she'd shown all evening, trusting that the two adults who loved her would somehow find a way to protect the family they'd built together. But in the back of the gymnasium, Derek Patterson was already on his phone with Sarah's lawyer, describing how Margaret Thornfield had just publicly promised to financially back James Mitchell's custody fight. The battle lines had been drawn, and Emma was caught in the middle. 1 month later, Judge Patricia Hoffman's courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and curious onlookers as the custody hearing reached its climax. For 4 weeks, Emma had been living under supervised visitation, seeing her father only 3 times a week for 2 hours each, always with a court-appointed social worker present. Margaret sat in the gallery, having been barred from any contact with Emma during the proceedings. She'd kept her promise, hiring the best family attorney in Manhattan, but the legal system moved slowly, and every day Emma spent away from James felt like a year. Your Honor, Sarah's attorney, Marcus Webb, addressed the court. The evidence clearly shows that Mr. Mitchell has prioritized his romantic relationship over his daughter's well-being. The child has been exposed to media scrutiny, social disruption, and emotional instability, all because her father chose to pursue a relationship with someone whose lifestyle is fundamentally incompatible with responsible parenting. James sat at the defendant's table with his attorney, Lisa Chen, no relation to their neighbor, but just as fierce in her own way. The past month had aged him years. Not seeing Emma every day, not being able to tuck her in at night or help with homework, had broken something fundamental in him. Mr. Mitchell, Judge Hoffman addressed James directly, you've heard the allegations. That your relationship with Mrs. Thornfield has created an unstable environment for your daughter. How do you respond? James stood, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Your Honor, I respond that loving someone doesn't make you a bad parent. It makes you a better one. Emma has seen what it looks like when 2 adults support each other, respect each other, and choose to build something together instead of tearing it down. But the media attention, Sarah's lawyer interrupted. The media attention exists because people can't accept that love doesn't recognize economic boundaries, James said firmly. Emma didn't ask for that attention, but she's handled it with more grace than most of the adults in this room. She's proud of our family, not ashamed of it. Judge Hoffman looked at her notes. I've reviewed the social worker's reports, the school evaluations, and the psychological assessment of the child. Emma Mitchell is thriving academically, socially, and emotionally. Her teachers report no behavioral problems, no signs of distress, no indication that she's being harmed by her current family structure. Sarah leaned forward in her chair, clearly not liking where this was heading. However, the judge continued, I am concerned about the disruption this case has caused in the child's life. Emma has been removed from her stable home environment for a month, based on allegations that, frankly, seem more motivated by financial opportunity than genuine concern for the child's welfare. Marcus Webb jumped up. Your Honor, my client's concerns are entirely legitimate. Mr. Webb, sit down, Judge Hoffman said sharply. I've seen the timeline of events here. Your client showed no interest in increased custody for 3 years after her divorce. Then, within 2 weeks of Mr. Mitchell's relationship becoming public, she suddenly develops deep concerns about Emma's welfare. I find that timing suspicious. Sarah's face flushed red, but she remained silent. Furthermore, Judge Hoffman continued, I've reviewed the anonymous tips to child services. All 5 reports came from the same IP address, registered to Patterson Construction. Mr. Patterson, would you care to explain why you've been filing false reports about a child you've never met? Derek Patterson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Your Honor, I was merely concerned about— You were concerned about positioning yourself to benefit financially from this situation. The judge cut him off. I've been presiding over family court for 15 years, Mr. Patterson. I recognize a gold-digging scheme when I see one. Margaret felt her heart racing. The judge was seeing through Sarah's manipulation, but the real question was what would happen to Emma. Now, Judge Hoffman said, I'd like to hear from Emma herself. James's lawyer had requested this, knowing that at 8 years old, Emma was old enough for her voice to be considered. A bailiff brought Emma into the courtroom, and Margaret's heart broke seeing the little girl looking so small and serious in her best dress. Hi, Emma, Judge Hoffman said gently. Do you know why we're all here today? Yes, ma'am. Some people think my daddy shouldn't take care of me anymore because he loves Margaret. And how do you feel about your daddy loving Margaret? Emma thought carefully before answering. I think it's good. Before Margaret, my daddy was sad sometimes. He tried to hide it, but I could tell. Now he smiles more, and he laughs when Margaret tells funny stories about her work. And Margaret makes really good pancakes. A few people in the courtroom chuckled softly. Do you feel safe with your daddy and Margaret? Judge Hoffman asked. Very safe. Margaret taught me that if someone ever tries to take pictures of me without permission, I should tell a grown-up right away. And my daddy always makes sure I do my homework and brush my teeth and say my prayers. They both tuck me in at night when Margaret sleeps over. Emma, your mother thinks you might be happier living with her and Mr. Patterson. How do you feel about that? Emma's face grew serious. Your Honor, my mommy left me when I was 5 because she said taking care of me was too hard. She didn't call me on my birthday last year. She doesn't know that I'm lactose intolerant now, or that I lost my first tooth, or that I can do a cartwheel. My daddy knows all those things. And Margaret knows them too now. Sarah started crying, but Emma wasn't finished. I love my mommy, but she doesn't want to be my mommy except when it might make her money. My daddy wants to be my daddy every single day, even when I'm cranky or sick or when I have bad dreams. And Margaret wants to be. Emma paused, searching for the right words. Margaret wants to be my bonus mom. That's what Mrs. Chen calls her. Judge Hoffman smiled. A bonus mom? Yes, ma'am. Like when you get extra fries with your meal. But better because Margaret helps with homework and takes me shopping for dance shoes and listens when I talk about my friends. The judge looked around the courtroom, her decision clearly made. Thank you, Emma. You can go sit with Mrs. Chen now. As Emma left the witness area, Judge Hoffman addressed the room. In all my years on the bench, I've rarely seen a case where the motivations were so transparent. Mrs. Mitchell, you abandoned your parental responsibilities 3 years ago. You cannot now claim them back simply because your ex-husband's circumstances have improved. Your Honor, Sarah started to protest. I'm not finished. Mr. Patterson, filing false reports with child services is a crime. You'll be hearing from the district attorney's office. And Mr. Webb, I'm referring your conduct in this case to the Bar Association for review. Margaret gripped the bench in front of her, hardly daring to hope. Mr. Mitchell, Judge Hoffman continued, you are a devoted father who has provided Emma with stability, love, and security for 3 years. Your relationship with Mrs. Thornfield has, if anything, enhanced Emma's life, not damaged it. Full custody is restored to you immediately with standard visitation rights for Mrs. Mitchell, if she chooses to exercise them responsibly. James almost collapsed with relief. In the gallery, Margaret started crying. Tears of joy mixed with a month's worth of suppressed fear and anger. Furthermore, the judge added, I'm issuing a restraining order preventing Mr. Patterson from any contact with Emma or interference in this family's life. This court will not tolerate adults using children as pawns in their financial schemes. As the courtroom erupted in noise, reporters shouting questions, lawyers gathering papers, family members celebrating, Emma ran straight to her father. James lifted her into his arms, holding her like he'd never let her go. Margaret approached slowly, still not sure if she was allowed to be part of the reunion. Margaret, Emma called out, reaching for her. We won. We get to be a family again. Margaret joined their embrace, the three of them holding each other in the middle of the chaos, finally understanding what they'd been fighting for all along. 6 months later, at Emma's 9th birthday party in Central Park, Margaret watched James push his daughter on the swings while Mrs. Chen unpacked a picnic lunch. The media attention had died down. Margaret's divorce had been finalized with far less financial damage than predicted, and Thornfield Industries was stronger than ever under her leadership. But more importantly, Emma was thriving. She'd started calling Margaret Mom M to distinguish her from Mom S, Sarah, who had never exercised her visitation rights. James had been promoted to head of facilities at the medical center, and Margaret had learned that the biggest, most luxurious apartment in Manhattan felt empty, compared to Sunday mornings in a small Queens apartment with pancakes and cartoons, and a little girl who sang off-key while she brushed her teeth. "Mom M," Emma called from the swings. "Come push me, I want to go higher." Margaret walked over, thinking about that night 6 months ago when she'd asked a stranger to pretend to love her for 10 minutes. She'd been so desperate for someone to look at her like she mattered that she'd been willing to pay for it. Now, watching Emma's face light up with joy, feeling James's hand slip into hers as they pushed the swing together, Margaret realized something profound. She'd asked for 10 minutes of pretend love and received a lifetime of the real thing. "Higher, Mom M. I want to touch the clouds." Margaret laughed, pushing harder, watching Emma soar toward the sky. Sometimes the best things in life started with the scariest leap of faith. Sometimes love really did conquer all, not because it was easy, but because it was worth fighting for. And sometimes when you're brave enough to be vulnerable with a stranger at 3 a.m., you discover that you weren't looking for someone to pretend to love you at all. You were looking for your family, and they were looking for you too.